What's going on? This is our last homework lecture from Unit 5, so all about cognition. So far we've talked about memory and thinking and intelligence. This last section is about language. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we develop language and how language is structured. So when I say language, the textbook definition is symbols that have meaning and the rules for organizing those symbols. Symbols that have meaning and the rules for organizing those symbols. When we talk about English or Spanish or German or French or made up language like Pig Latin or Klingon, it's the symbols that have meaning and then how people structure and put those symbols together. So for example, if I have a sentence, the strangers talked to the students, we can break that down into a phrase like the strangers. That means something in English. We can break it down to a single word, strangers. We can also break it down to what we call morphemes and phonemes. We'll talk about this on the next slide. You don't need to write anything down yet besides the definition, but morphemes, the word strangers, can be broken up into three components. The root strange, this root ER, meaning somebody who does something, player is gonna play, haters gonna hate, right? ER means someone who does the thing. And then having an S at the end of the word lets us know in English that there are more than one of these things. Strangers, those are called morphemes. And then phonemes are just sounds. So here's your definition. Phonemes are the smallest sounds, s, t, r, a, n, j, s. Strangers, those combine to produce morphemes. Morphemes have meaning. They have semantics. Okay, so if you will, please put a star by these words, phonemes and morphemes. There'll be questions on the test, questions on the AP exam, where you're going to have to tell the difference between these two particular words. Because language can be combined in so many different ways, we say that language is generative. We can generate an infinite number of words, phrases, and sentences. Y'all can say a sentence that has never been said in human history. You know, the pink muffin jumped on top of the desk and did the Macarena. I just said a sentence that I don't think anyone has ever said in human history because it doesn't make sense. But language is generative. There will always be new songs written, new poems written, new books written, because words, phrases, and sentences can always be combined in new ways. And that's kind of cool to think about. So how is language structured? We have this word, semantics. So language has the meaning behind it. And then we also have what your language arts teachers care a little bit more about, perhaps. We have what we call syntax. On our free responses, when we're talking, I usually say, I don't care about semantics. I'm sorry, I don't care about syntax. I don't care about spelling and grammar. I do care about semantics. I just want to make sure that you understand the concepts. Now, it is helpful to be able to follow the rules of language. So we call this grammar, and this is a fun word, morphology. How we combine morphemes. Morph, to change. So how we combine, that's probably a better word for morph, how we change and combine different terms, okay? So the word bookkeepers is a combination of 4 different morphemes. It's ER, it's the person who is in charge of these objects. Oh, and we have several of them. Bookkeepers. Different languages have different rules for how we combine words. So like in Spanish, does the subject or the adjective come first? Does the verb or subject come first? So like oso blanco, well, oso means bear, blanco means white. In English, we kind of flip the order, right? We say white bear, right? There is a difference. So German is one language that has some really fun ways to combine new words. We'll talk about those in class, okay? Quick check for understanding. See if you can answer these questions. Number 2, it has you count the morphemes. We'll do that in class. We'll go over the answers. I can do A with you. Go home, Mr. Jones. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just 4 morphemes. But Mr. Jones, that word ends in an S. Yeah, it does. That does not always mean that it's a plural word though, right? So you have to keep in mind, does that symbol have meaning on its own? So do B and C, make sure you can tell the difference there for how many morphemes there are. Part 3, how do we develop language? Well, babies, stupid, dumb babies, hate them, they're useless. For the first 6 months of their life, they just make noises, and all babies pretty much sound the same. Around the 6-month mark, circle this word babbling, and this is bolded. It says babbling is language-specific sounds. So if a baby has grown up speaking English, they will make English sounds. If a baby has grown up hearing Mandarin, the sounds they make starting on 6 months will sound like Mandarin characters, right? I had a student once who said that they had a younger sibling who was 9 months old, and that younger sibling would just sit there going, rolling their R's. An English-speaking babbler baby would not roll their R's, but a Spanish-speaking baby would, right? Babbling, it is language-specific. In English, mama, papa, ba, ba, ah. Those are the sounds that usually come first related to the English language because they're easiest to make with the mouth. Around 1 year old is when babies start to be able to use one-word phrases. Mama, papa, ball, food, doggy, right? Hollow phrases, one word. Around 1.5 years, they start to be able to put words together. So telegraphic speech. If you've ever heard what a telegram is, back in the day when you were sending communication, you had to pay by the word. So you would not send a telegram that said like, hello, father, I have found the horses we are looking for. We will return in 7 days. You would send a telegram that said, found horses, return soon. And that would be your message because you needed to save that money, right? So telegraphic speech is like a telegram. It's like 2-word phrases. Throw ball, daddy bye-bye, me hungry, go poopy. I don't know. At the 2-year mark, that is when kids really start to learn a ton of words. And we have what's called fast mapping, which is when a kid can hear a word once and then start to use that word, which is kind of cool, can be problematic when it's a bad word. So y'all may have had instances when you were little or when a sibling was little that they heard someone say a bad word once and they started saying that bad word a lot. That is fast mapping. It's normal. Around the 2-year mark, their brains are ready to start taking in a lot of new vocabulary. Make sure that without looking at your notes, you can answer these 4 questions. Number 3 is a throwback to before the break. Same with number 2. And number 4 requires you to kind of break down morphemes and phonemes. Good luck. Meaning versus sound. Make sure you know the difference for number 4. So the most famous person for today's notes is a guy named Jean Piaget. We mentioned him back in Unit 1 as our overview, but Jean Piaget. He was Swiss. They love to say he was a Swiss psychologist. And he had a theory where he talked about how kids develop in their thinking. Cognitive thinking develop, how they change over time. The name Piaget, okay, so it has the word age in the middle of it. It also has the word get. So I like to say that Piaget is how as you age, you get new ways of thinking. And if you really want to be fancy, right, Pi, as a complicated concept that you would not get until you have aged, until you're a little bit older. So as you get older, you get new ways of thinking, okay? So he said that there's 2 ways that we take in new information. So one, he said, we assimilate, okay? We assimilate. He said, assimilate, we often look stupid. We are not doing a good job. Sometimes this is called overextension. So with assimilating, we see a new object or we see a new concept and we don't have the right word for it. So we just like pick the word that's closest, okay? So for example, if you've seen Monsters, Inc., when she sees Sully, she calls him Kitty. Stupid boo, right? She is assimilating. She is being stupid, right? In contrast, once she learns, oh, Kitty is small, fluffy, has tail, scratches, and meows. Sully is bigger, talks, works at the company, Sully is a monster. Kitty is a small cat. When they start to create new words, we call this accommodation. Accommodation. It's the exact same spelling and word for what the lens does with the eye, so that's a little bit problematic. But accommodation, it's when you actually create the new words and the new categories. Something else Piaget said happens. Piaget said that as kids get older, and some of y'all still do this, they will overuse, put a star by this whole slide really. They will overuse grammar rules, over-regulate. Regulation is a rule. They will overuse the rule. They will overgeneralize the rule. So like you should actually say, mommy went bye-bye, but they will say, mommy goed bye-bye. Stupid kids. Well, what's the rule? Technically, they're trying to use the rule that when you put ed at the end of a word, it makes it past tense, right? But English is a weird language, so the rules don't always work, right? They might say, you're supposed to say my feet hurt. They might say my foot's hurt. They're using a rule that when you put an S at the end of a word, it's plural. Football is, you should say more fun, but what a little kid will say is, it's funner, because they know that when you put ER, it's when you're comparing things. So Piaget said this is actually a sign that they understand the rules. It's just that sometimes they can take the rules too far, overuse them, over-regulate. Make sure that you can answer these questions about Piaget's theory, especially A through E. Which of Piaget's theory is being shown by this example when a kid says this thing? I believe our last section, some other theories of language. Yes, okay, last section. The first is called linguistic determinism. Put a star by that. To determine, right? So the idea here, a guy's name was Benjamin Lee Whorf. He says the words you have and the language that you speak, that actually has an impact on how you think. Language determines how we think about things. So for example, in the Inuit language, which is the Eskimo people, they have a lot of different words for snow. And because they have a lot of words for snow, they actually think about snow differently. They can tell the difference between types of snow that would look exactly the same to us. They've found that like artists, when you have more words for color, they can actually look at two shades of blue or green or red that might look like they're the exact same to me. I would just say, that one's green and that one's green. And because they have more words, language determines how they perceive the color, and they'll actually see the colors differently as lighter or darker or deeper than we would see them because we just don't have the right words for it. So that's one theory of language. Language determines how we think. Another theory of language, number two, is just the behaviorist idea, which we've talked about. But the idea that language comes because it's just us learning. We are watching others, we are copying others. That's what Bandura would say, right? The Bobo doll guy, right? We watch other people and that's how we learn. Now the problem with this is that learning is not perfect, as we said in our last unit. So there's a thing called blocking. When you're trying to say a word and it's on the tip of your tongue and you just can't remember it. It's like a little bit of a memory problem and a little bit of a language problem as well. Number three, nativism. Put a star by it. The guy's name is Noam Chomsky. And nativism is the idea that all humans, the thing that makes us human is our ability to communicate with language. Humans have an innate, that word means a natural, a genetic, a biological, it is part of our nature capacity to learn languages. So he said that there's actually a part of your brain, and he was theorizing this like in the 1960s. There's a part of your brain that can pick up language really easily. And over the last 50 years, we have found that indeed there is. Y'all know what it is. Which part of your language is in charge of, your brain is in charge of speaking? Broca's area. What part of the brain is in charge of understanding? Wernicke's area. So Chomsky was onto something. And it's kind of been supported by this fact. There's been some research. If you've learned about feral children, like Jeannie, kids who grew up in an abusive home or had to sort of grow up on their own, or there's all these like crazy stories sometimes about someone who grew up with animals rather than with other humans. If they don't learn language during a couple of years of their life, so during their critical period, they might not be able to use language at all. Okay, really interesting. We'll talk more about that in class. But so Tom was kind of on something. We all have the brain capacity to learn language, but we have to be exposed to languages at a particular time in our life, or we might never be able to learn those particular phonemes or rules. So, for example, I was talking about rolling your R's. If you're not exposed to that at an early age, that might not be a thing that you're able to do later in life, because you have to be exposed to certain aspects of language early on in the first couple years of your life to really be able to master that language. And as y'all know, we learn languages better when we are younger. Okay. See if you can answer these questions. We'll check for understanding. Make sure you can do one out your notes. Email me if you have any questions. Appreciate y'all. Peace out.